Vaccines are a very contentious topic in America today. I have dear friends who are young and at low risk, and they're saying that they won't get the vaccine, that they would rather falsify their vaccine status if they have to. I know other people who feel like the vaccine is the answer to a prayer, right? That this is God giving us what we need to get past this. I know people on all sides of this. One of my fundamental conclusions about everything that we've seen over the last year is that it is deeply unhealthy and incredibly problematic for health decisions to be taken over by public health bureaucrats, and that there's no discussion or debate allowed about this. It's do what you're told. Shut up and do what you're told. And when you start to push back on this, there's this mob Fauciite consensus mentality of, we've already thought all this through for you. You don't have autonomy. You don't have any basis for questioning this. You have to just do what we tell you to do. And it's not even just a function of whether or not you take this risk yourself. It's also whether you're willing, whether you'll do what you're supposed to do to protect all those around you. And so you're morally blackmailed into the Fauciite consensus, as I call it, which is just these people make decisions. They're not accountable to anyone. They don't get fired. There's no, how many public health experts in this pandemic have resigned because they suck at their jobs? How many? Right? Fauci somehow, on the one hand, he says we had the worst virus response of any country in the world, which isn't even true by the numbers, not by a long shot, but Fauci will say that. But he essentially stays on in the Biden administration. He's the immovable bureaucrat. Nothing can get rid of this guy, huh? He stays forever. He keeps his job forever. And that's the mentality that's at the heart of so much of what we've seen here, that it doesn't matter what really happens. The good, smart people who make these decisions for you are infallible, even when they're wrong. Now, I know that's incoherent. It doesn't make sense, but that's what we've been forced to accept as a country. We've been forced. If you didn't agree to mask up, if you didn't agree to double mask now, if you didn't agree to social distance, it didn't agree to shut down your business, if you didn't agree to stop going to church, they made you do these things, or else. And when they're wrong, there's no consequence for them because they think they're doing the right thing. Okay. This has resulted in a society that is now completely unmoored when it comes to risk management and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Let me tell you this. I have always been in the camp of people who strongly believe that you should be able to determine whether or not you get the vaccine. It is in your hands. It's your choice. And I've advocated for people who are at high risk to get the vaccine, but I've also said that I believe even for those people, it should be their choice. Do you want to get this to protect you? What they've done, though, is by exaggerating. Oh, did you know they've exaggerated asymptomatic spread? If you look at the estimates and the numbers they were using 12 months ago and what we actually see now, they've dramatically exaggerated asymptomatic spread. But that was necessary. You see, they had to make it seem like a more urgent threat, because if really it's sick people that give this to other people, and particularly people that are pre-symptomatic in a home setting where the government has basically no real control over the situation, how are they going to get everyone to mask up and lock down and wash their hands and stay home? So they exaggerated asymptomatic spread. And I can show you, this is in the journal Nature. There are publications that have pulled the data, pulled the studies together, and they are very clear on this. They will show you that, they thought it was 40% asymptomatic spread. It's probably more like 10 to 20%. Now, you could say, well, that's still a lot of people. Okay, but so now it's asymptomatic people all had to wear masks because there was a 10% of the spread coming from them, even in situations where, you start to break down numbers. You say, is this a necessary public health measure, or is this a panic maneuver? Can't even have this discussion, though, in most places. I would get kicked off. I love that I'm on the radio, and I love that I podcast, because I can say, I can't write these things to you right now. I can't actually put this stuff out on Twitter or Facebook or even online, although I try to sneak some in at bucksexton.com, so you should always go to my website there. And I've got a piece on what a bureaucratic monstrosity the CDC is up right now that I wrote. But we haven't had the exchange of ideas necessary to come to the truth on this stuff. We've been told what to do. And this brings me to, and if you try to do what I do, which is come at these from different angles and have a real exchange, rooted in the facts, rooted in reality, and make the case that these are risk management decisions. Health policy is not the science, and people who say that are morons, because it's, okay, what level of risk is acceptable? What level of risk? That's why Fauci won't give you an answer now, by the way, about when we go back to normal. He could say when we're at this number, but then they'd have to stick to that. And people would say, well, why is it that number? I mean, we could probably handle it. You're still accepting there'll be some spread, there'll be some death of COVID, but we're going to go back to total normalcy, right? So why does Fauci get to decide that? You're starting to see this is the problem. This is the shaky foundation of their argument. And then you have this recent Johnson & Johnson situation. And this is getting a lot of, panic click headlines. Oh my gosh, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. By the numbers right now, the chance of, in the U.S., the chance of getting a blood clot from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is 1 in a million. 1 in a million. That's the actual chance. But you've had 6 cases of blood clots that they think are attributable to the vaccine. You've had 6 million vaccinations. And so now the CDC is saying, well, we should consider a pause. Notice they keep doing this. Pause your life. Pause the vaccine. Life goes on, folks. I mean, this notion that we're just going to hit the pause button. Well, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. And people are freaking out about this. Young people that I know who are at very low risk from COVID and very low risk from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I know some of you are saying, Buck, how do we even know what the long-term effects are of this? The answer is, you're right. We don't know. That's a very simple truth that I think we should all be comfortable with. We don't really know. There has been no long-term testing on these vaccines. That's just a fact. And I know right now you say this kind of stuff and you might get, banned from the internet. You might be called anti-vax. I'm stating an obvious truth. How can they run long-term testing on vaccines that have been in existence for less than a year? Somebody, riddle me that. But I'm getting the vaccine. I am I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm just merely pointing out we can't even talk about it. And that results in a lack of trust among people who say, why aren't we able to have an open discussion about this? Why have the social media companies and the news media and American corporations all united to effectively become high priests of the mask religion? Masking did not save us from this. Masking was also tried extensively in the Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918, and in case you didn't know, didn't work out for that one either. But there were people who believed if only we mask more, we'll be safe. And there were big fights about it. There were anti-mask societies. And now you have, beta males from Vox.com who are running around writing pieces about how they know the science. No, they really don't. They really don't. And there's been such a shutdown of debate and discussion that now 1 in a million risk, when the Fauciite consensus wants it to be, is too high, do what they say. But people see this and they say, well, hold on. If the chance of my 2-year-old getting COVID and giving COVID to anyone else is, 1 in 50,000 or 1 in 100,000, and the state says that's not acceptable, which is what they have done in some states. If that's their approach, is 1 in a million risk from a vaccine something that we need to take on? Right? You see how they've completely and utterly undermined our notion of a reasonable assessment of risk in society for health and for public health purposes. Because when they want you to shut up, they say, well, it's not 100%, so we can't say you're safe. When they want you to lock down and mask up, it's, well, if it saves just one life. They're playing these games with all these numbers all the time. They're making value judgments for you. They're making judgments based on ratios and numbers for you, not absolute principles. They're saying this is acceptable risk for you. But they pretend that there's actually an answer to this, and they've got it. You see, is 1 in a million a risk for a vaccine for you? Is that something that gives you pause? Shouldn't be. 1 in a million risk. If you look at other things out there, you'd never leave your house if you're worried about 1 in a million risk. But they have conditioned the American people. The lockdown mentality is that if there is any chance, even theoretical chance, of an outcome, and we want to use this to take away your freedom and liberty, that's enough. That's what they've done. So you see, they've reset the neurons in millions and millions of people's brains here. They've changed our thinking about this. They've abused it and manipulated it for their own purposes. And now we're seeing what the results are when there are some problems. It was inevitable that there were going to be some problems with these vaccines. All vaccines have some level of risk, but in order to control people's actions and control populations, they play games with the actual ratio, the actual numbers, and pretend to have all the answers when they don't. And now they've got a situation of tremendous public distrust. And I know a lot of you disagree with me, and I'm pro-vaccination on this point. Not for all vaccines, but for this vaccine, yeah. I think this makes sense for people. That said, I understand that it should be a choice, and I understand that they've pretended to have more certainty than they do, and they've taken away your ability to make your own choices here under the premise that they are like the public health gods and cannot be questioned. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.